You are listening to That's
That's
High
high praise.
Praise, a Nicolas Cage podcast.
I'm your co-host VH Zest.
I'm your other co-host, Captain Nostalgia. Howdy, partner.
Hello, sir. Ye, and I cannot stress this enough. Ha.
Yes, we are talking about the long anticipated Western Butcher's Crossing.
Yes, this one is based off of a book, I believe. That came
Yes,
out yeah,
1960.
1960. Yeah, so it's a little bit older of a book for sure. And then the movie itself, like Josh was saying, long awaited. This debuted, I believe, in Toronto last October, I want to say.
So this
Um,
actually made its world premiere in Toronto at the Toronto International
yeah,
Film Festival, TIFF, on September 9th, 2022.
September. Okay. Yeah. So it's been over a year. This has been, quote, internationally released. We've been waiting for it for 13 months. Um, I think we just anticipated it pretty highly because up until this and allegedly up until the old way, um, because that also vies for being Nicolas Cage's first Western. But yeah, exactly that. Nicolas Cage wasn't really known for Westerns, especially depending on like what you classify as a Western. Um, if you mean it in more of a classic sense, then this and The Old Way are definitely his first Westerns. And yeah, I think we really just wanted to see him bald, if I'm honest. That was just our that was our biggest allure. We were like, oh, he's bald, because neither of us are super big into Westerns, but yeah, yeah.
As a bald man myself, he wore that cap, shaved it. This is the first trivia fact of the night. This is the only movie he has ever appeared bald in.
Yeah, so
So
cool.
not only is it one of his first westerns, but also so before we start talking about this movie, I think this is crazy because I know a little bit more about like distribution and kind of
Yeah,
how stuff works. I think maybe a little bit more than you.
yeah, totally.
So like typically like America gets a lot of these releases first, and they will either be like in conjunction with like other countries, or like other countries will have to wait like, maybe anywhere between a week to like 6 months.
Sure.
This is the reverse. And I think
Right.
that's so fascinating because not only did this movie premiere last September, but Saban Films, the distributor behind this film, announced in September of 2021, so 2 years ago, that they had acquired the North American rights to this film,
Yeah.
as well as Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, France, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and Scandinavia, while Altitude Film Distribution was handling the international sales and distributing the film in both the UK and Ireland. And it blows me away because I feel like I don't know. This is a great segue, but like I feel like if a film is like waiting, if we're waiting this long for a film, I guess I kind of like I don't know what I expected with this. So I guess like
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. But I mean, to be fair, I don't really know how the market is viewed. I'm not sure that it was the kind of thing where they were waiting to release it in America because like, oh, America's gonna love it, or oh, that's where we're gonna make most of our sales. I don't think it was necessarily to stir any sort of anticipation in the long term. My theory, and this is just a theory based on pretty much nothing, is that they just wanted a wide berth, from the old way, because we don't need two Nick Cage westerns within a short period, and even a 6 month period would have felt kind of short, between the two.
yeah. What I think is wild to also consider about this movie, we have followed this movie way closer than most normal people do,
Yeah.
or probably do any for a release. However, this was such a random release because like all year, every couple of weeks, you would check in and be like, still
Nope.
nothing,
Yeah.
still nothing.
Yeah.
And
Meanwhile, like retirement plan almost came out under our noses. which we haven't
Yeah.
talked about that movie yet, but like that came out, just debuted toward the end of August, and it was just like all of a sudden it was a new Nick Cage movie. So yeah, this one was a weird release.
Yeah, so like all year we've been checking it, and then like randomly at like the beginning of this month, they're just like Saban made the announcement, dropped the trailer, and they're like, by the way, 2 weeks, Nicolas Cage, The Butcher's Crossing, it's hitting theaters. Which let me just say, I feel like this movie feels out of season. I don't know where in the rest of the year you put something like Butcher's Crossing, but it felt like
Yeah,
it should be like a December, January release.
I think I would agree as well. Especially so this movie it doesn't really have chapters, but there are kind of headings for some of the parts that are like fall, and then the next one is like winter. It does that a few times. And just keeping that in mind, I suppose it makes sense that like it was released in the fall, but there's really not. Yeah, there's no occasion for it. October, especially late October, drawing in on Halloween, and then Halloween leading way to Christmas releases and stuff like that. It definitely feels odd. I think September would have been a great time, um, if only because I wouldn't have wanted to wait several more months until January or
Sure.
February, and summer would certainly have felt out of place. So honestly, I think like late September would have been a fine time for this film, given his other releases.
This movie, like, not necessarily thematically, but like, I don't like narratively, I feel like
Mm,
it feels like a Western version of like The Revenant from Leonardo DiCaprio, which I don't think you've seen.
no, I don't
What
follow
is
Leonardo DiCaprio.
it's the one where he fights the bear and he won the Oscar for it. Uh, that's kind of what this movie reminded me of, just a little bit, not a whole lot, but definitely the third act of this movie. But we've been jumping around this. What are your general spoiler-free thoughts on this movie?
Sure. My general spoiler-free thoughts. Um, this movie, we're gonna go with the positives, and then we're gonna kind of go downhill from there, I guess. This movie is beautiful, absolutely stunning. The cinematography is
Agreed.
wonderful. The music is, and this isn't a bad thing, so I'm gonna start. This is really early. The music is odd. But it goes along with a lot of the cinematography in a very interesting and gorgeous way. This movie, like it was filmed entirely, I'm pretty sure it was entirely in Montana, and they state that at the end of the movie. Nick Cage talks about it in his roundtable read that he released on YouTube earlier this year. Um, and it's just gorgeous up there. They capture seasons absolutely beautifully. Um, my biggest problem with the old way, if you remember, if you've listened to that episode, and if you have not, what are you doing? Um, my biggest qualm with the old way was that it felt like we were watching sets that had been filmed. It
Yeah.
didn't feel immersive. It didn't feel dirty or lived in at all. Like movies should, and especially Westerns ought to and often do. This movie feels immersive and dirty and lived in. It feels, uh, you know, it's kind of one of those things where sometimes if a movie feels self-aware, that's a good thing. If a movie kind of takes itself for granted, it's also a really good thing. This movie kind of takes itself for granted. It's just so it feels very well established in just its sets and period and things like that. Um, yeah, the music, like I said, the music's really good, really cool. The music is very ominous, which, and this is where my opinions kind of go downhill a little bit. The music is very ominous, and there are like scenes of, skulls and body parts and things of animals, and it pairs along with the music in a way that's just really spooky, and there's no payoff to that whatsoever. The movie never gets spooky or creepy. You feel like you're waiting for some sort of reveal or twist or new piece of information, and you never really get it. The music is awesome and I love it, but by the end, some of those scenes are just odd. Um, The acting is really, really fantastic. Cage does an absolutely fantastic job. I wasn't familiar with any of the other actors in this movie. I think only one looked familiar, but they all did a really, really fine job. Um, it is a period piece. They had some information at the end that was just factual information, nothing spoiler related. It was just about the bison population in America, and which was really sad and very neat. And when it comes to today, and um, they talked about natives. You don't get to see any natives. I thought that was a little bit of a bummer. But I don't know the book. I don't know how close this was to the book or not. But above all, this movie is just painfully, painfully boring. It's just so much nothing happens. I was about halfway through, if that, checking my phone in the theater, and I don't do that. Um, and it was just I kept waiting for things to pick back up, things to get interesting. There felt like a mysterious aspect to Cage's character. Not really. They never address it at all. They take that for granted. It's just boring.
Yeah, as Mike has said at the beginning of the show, like I'm not a guy that likes Westerns to begin with.
Mhm,
So like I was really surprised that I liked the old way as much as I did.
mhm.
And so I was a little bit kind of more optimistic with this one, but I was able to take notes in this, which because like our theater was also very empty. And I needed something that was going to like he help me focus
Mhm,
because like this movie is so freaking boring. And
mhm.
I definitely agree with a lot of what you said in terms of like the technical aspects, but even that like I have qualms with. I
Sure,
have so many qualms with this movie. Like
sure.
I have so many like questions for the filmmakers who made this movie to where I'm like, I feel like I can't give an example because it jumps into spoilers, but like half my notes are like questions.
Yeah. Hmm.
And this movie just makes some like really bizarre like editing choices,
Yeah.
and it just has some like really like you said like they're just sequences and storylines in this movie that literally have no payoff. There's no purpose. Like
No.
why are they here?
Yeah. Yeah. Literally, there's. I don't think this is a spoiler, but there's one character who asks Cage's character. His name is Miller. Cage plays a character named Miller. Um, and this character is like, "Why buffalo? Why hunting buffalo? I mean, there's plenty of ways to make a living. I get that it can be lucrative, blah blah blah, but
Yes.
like, this is very hard. Why do this?" Cage doesn't answer, and you never ever get the answer ever by the end of the movie, ever. And it's like, why do you ask the question? Like, for real. It just, yeah.
Also, so since we are technically still in spooky season and you brought this up with the music being ominous, there's a sequence between William, who's kind of this like very
Bushy-tailed, bright-eyed young
idealistic,
guy.
yeah, and sure, we'll expand upon that, but he is there essentially we follow the company of four characters, him, Cage, Jeremy Bob, who plays um he plays the Skinner guy, and then the old guy whose name I can't remember right now.
I gotcha.
But the old like so the elderly gentleman and Will are having a conversation, and essentially what it comes down to is uh like they're having this conversation about like supposed to be this like really deep theological, and it just feels like an acid trip. And it's really weird. Like,
Yeah.
all right, all right. I'm just gonna put a spoiler warning. So if you guys haven't seen Butcher's Crossing yet, click pause, hit the subscribe button, go watch it, come back, or
Yep.
don't get it spoiled. Um, let's jump into this because I have so many like things. Like anytime that I am like taking notes for a film, and I have more questions than I do criticisms, I always feel like that's the sign of like a really bad movie.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There are movies that we've watched that I've enjoyed more that I would also probably be harsher on. This movie's an odd one. Um, but narratively, I think we're probably on the same page. Um,
Like I just didn't understand like why the movie was like edited in certain ways. Like there's a scene. This is a great example of like scenes going nowhere. I don't remember which character it is, but in my notes I just said, "Why is homie watching him poop?"
yeah,
There, like I'm like, why is this scene in
yeah,
here? Like it doesn't. It serves no greater like it brings nothing to it. Like it's also like really tonally weird. Like there are several times where like Cage's character, like Bob's character, they'll bring up just continuously like balls.
balls.
Like any
I was gonna say like there are an odd amount of testicles in this movie. Um,
and like
more than one, which is in and of itself, that's just odd. More than one is odd.
yeah, I think what was your favorite testicle bit for this one?
My favorite testicle bit was so they're supposed to be in Colorado. Colorado is known for Rocky Mountain oysters, which is bull testicles. So my favorite testicle bit is they're skinning one of the buffalo, and the guy cuts the testicles off and he goes, "Here," um, and it says something about like it's good eating or something like that. That was my favorite. It was graphic, but it was kind of funny. Um, and I've had Rocky Mountain oysters before, so it was just like I get it. Like it's just funny.
So my favorite was the one where they enter into the trading post and
That one was stupid, but
they go to
continue.
the trading post and you don't see anything, but it's like the natives essentially came and like you know killed this guy that essentially like took horns and like shoved it up his like rectum and then like chopped off his nuts and like separated the nuts
Yeah,
from the rest of
you
his
see his
body for
hand.
some reason.
His hand is open and he's got his nuts in his hand. It's just, yeah, it
I
is
was like,
what it is.
why? Why?
Yeah, but basically, the idea of this story is Will, the younger guy, he drops out of Harvard. He's traveling to the West, so he's kind of entering into the town of Butcher's Crossing. He wants to see the country. That's his whole deal. He just wants to know and see the country. So he figures a way to do that is to find an old friend of the family who pays out for buffalo hides. And so he wants to go on an expedition. And so the guy basically like didn't respect him, didn't want to help him out. So he happened to pass by Cage's character. He goes back and finds him and he basically funds this expedition. Cage's character has this outlandish idea of where there's going to be tens of thousands of buffalo because he apparently saw it one time. And so he already has this friend of his whose name I can't remember either, and it's not on IMDb, which is weird. Um, but and then he has this trapper guy who's like kind of an outlaw. You find out later, and they all go and they have to go like basically into the Rockies, up into the mountains to find this valley where there's just hundreds of thousands, or tens of thousands at least of buffalo. And that is 110% the story. That
Yeah.
is the whole entire story. It's just them going there, them killing buffalo, them waiting it out, killing buffalo. They get stuck in the winter. They're there for months and months. That's the story.
That's what is like so like painfully obvious. Like this movie takes place over the course of like probably like 8 months.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a
And
while.
it it's one of those films that like literally just feels like it drains the life out of you
Yeah.
the entire time because it's essentially like every sequence that they have at the campsite literally leads to nowhere.
Yeah.
Absolutely nowhere. Like, yes, in the end, like they're like, we should go. And like it's a back and forth for like quite a while. But I felt like eventually, like it, nothing became of it. And that's kind of really what disappointed me
Yeah.
was that like, in between the buffalo seeds, like it seemed like everything was like building to buffalo hunting. We finally arrive at buffalo hunting, then the movie's like, oh yeah, we have to have interactions with these characters. If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us. I don't know, man.
Yeah, and that's it. And a lot
Really
of
sucked.
they're at camp and they're like one guy is like he reads the Bible and so he's talks about being God fearing and he talks about this and that. And the other guy's an outlaw and he doesn't want to hear it and he wants to talk about, women basically. And the other guy is the Will character who's just bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and just wanted to see the country and all that stuff. And he's the one with some money, so he's like helping fund the expedition. Um, and so he's just kind of trying to stay upbeat and alive, and then you have Cage's character who's clearly large and in charge, very much in control of of what's happening of the situation and everything. And Cage's character is awesome. Like Miller is awesome. He very much knows what he's doing. He's very, very confident. Um, he's very like uh he's a go-getter. He's one of those guys that's like he's a tough guy, but he also like I picked up on some interesting things, which again had zero payoff at all. So there was like a girl who worked at like the bar, and you kind of assume she's like a bar wench, but they never do anything to like really confirm it. Um, but anytime anybody like makes a pass at her or whatever, Cage's character like doesn't defend her, but he just kind of distracts from the conversation. Again, it's something you pick up on, has no payoff. I was expecting like, oh, maybe that's his, maybe they're together, maybe that's his sister, maybe something, nothing. Um, and yeah, so there are some interesting things like that. Anytime, anybody starts mouthing off, he's like, he just wants him to stop. Like he's very much like he's a hard-earned kind of tough as nails man, but you get the vibe that like he has a heart and like um he doesn't, he wants to kind of just let people be who they are and what they are. Um, but you also, again, you get into that idea of like why Buffalo? Um, and they never explain it ever. But you do notice that he has like scarring across the back of his head, which is bald. And then like there's one scene where he's just like shooting buffalo back and forth, and he mentions something about like you're not going to hurt me or you're not going to do this to me or blah, 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 blah. And so you get the idea that like he doesn't just hunt buffalo for the money. There's like some sort of like vendetta. There's some sort of like vengeful kind of attitude, but they never explain it and it never pays off. They camp at what they call hollowed ground because there's like it's supposed to be like an Indian burial site, and there's like a circle of rocks at one point, and they have a way to like put poison out and keep wolves away, and there's some really interesting stuff that again, coupled with the music and things like that, it could have been ominous, it could have been interesting and like mystical, and it never gets there. There are no natives in the movie whatsoever. In the movie, there were natives who worked on the movie, which was cool. But yeah, there's just no payoff to any of that.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack with everything you just said. Like starting with Cage though. Cage is the standout of this film,
Totally.
100%.
Yeah.
I think had anyone else been in this movie, been it would have essentially just fallen apart.
Yeah.
Um I think for what they end up doing with this, it's not as great as it's nowhere near the quality of the old way. Old way is not a great. It's not a
The
top
story.
five, but
Yeah.
yeah, he's good in it. It's a lot of fun. You
Right.
know, and this one is like you said. Like I think it's cool that they have that they had natives working on this and it made the story feel like there's like a level of like authenticity. Like
Totally.
I walked away with like the credits kind of scene with what they do being like, man, this is a movie I didn't like but that I ended up respecting
Totally.
because of the history, because of like where this was shot. That said, you brought this up earlier about how this is a film that feels immersive. There are a quite a no. I don't know if you picked up on this. So if you didn't, this is my gripe. There are a few. There are a few scenes. It's maybe like three or four, but there are a few scenes we actually where we actually do not get it's green screened, and it's like painfully obvious that it's green
Yeah.
screen.
I,
And
I know I noticed that.
I'm just like it doesn't make sense. It's like they're just it's really dumb that like just dumb things. It's like there's one of like Will's like isn't like center shot, like the camera's kind of panning around him. And it's like this seems like such a weird thing to bring in front of a green screen because
Yeah.
like you could have, and I mean maybe they they budgeted it for like a certain number of days and like
Yeah.
they had rain or inclement weather on those, but it's so brutally painful
Right.
to see some of the green screen, and I think it just adds to the confusion I have with this film.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're not wrong. Like there were like there are scenes of like buffalo running that are definitely like this is definitely special effects. They did not find, hundreds or 10,000 buffalo to have running. And those scenes don't look that bad because you assume that they needed to CGI it. And I've seen worse CGI. I've seen a
Sure.
Marvel movie, right? But yeah, and then there's like one scene where like it's totally green scene because they have like they kind of want to. Oh, this is another thing. There are scenes where like Will is like he's like either dreaming or hallucinating. Um,
I
no
it
payoff to it at all. It doesn't make any sense. He flashes back to like the girl at the bar. He flashes to like carcasses of buffalo. Makes zero sense. But like some of those scenes are green screen, and I think it is like a little appropriate because if you're doing like a dream or hallucination sequence, it shouldn't look completely real, you know? So like it being a little on the like digital side makes a little sense, especially they're kind of blending into one scene and into from one scene into another, things like that. But yeah, like yeah, it's just weird. And especially given the high quality of some of the shots and like the fact that they went out of their way to get like people who really worked with Buffalo and their scenes with Buffalo were absolutely beautiful. yeah, there are some scenes it's like, why doesn't this look anywhere near as incredible as the scene right before it?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the hallucination scenes
Yeah, dude.
because like there's one in particular where he's like so early on in the film, him and the bar, the waitress from the bar, if I can, Francine, she's like she tries to come on to him. It's established really early that he's a virgin, which is fine. But he has like a random like hallucination scene where like he's like walking in on Francine and Miller having sex.
Yeah,
And it's such an odd choice.
yeah, it makes no sense.
Like, it would make more sense to have him like, fantasize about like what could have happened,
Yeah,
if I had, gone down this rabbit trail and, you know, kind of, fantasized it in that way, this like what if moment, but to have like this random guy that you meet
yeah.
with this girl, like it's so strange.
It is very strange, and it makes me wonder if it's like, is this guy just like, is he? Are we trying to get? Are they trying to communicate that he's intimidated by the Miller character? You know, that like maybe he sees him as almost like a not a father figure, but like a mentor of sorts, someone who's taken him under his wing. That's still weird when it comes to that scene, but it's like, what are you trying to convey here? And I don't really even know. That's just guessing.
I mean, can we talk about Will? Because I gotta say, out of every actor that is in this movie, Fred Hinkler or Fred, however you say his last name, was the worst part of this movie.
You think so?
I could not stand him within like the moment that he opens his mouth to McDonald's and like is starting to like tell the story about like how they know each other. Like
Yeah,
I was like, I instantly don't like this kid. Like
yeah,
it felt too cliche. I was like, all right, they're gonna go on this like really harsh journey, and he's gonna see the world, but he's gonna, be broken spirited by the end of the movie. All that within the first frame, and lo and behold, like that is exactly what
exactly what happens.
happens by the end.
But I mean, honestly, I liked him. I think he did a good job. And we got to get used to him because he's going to be in Kraven the Hunter and Gladiator too. But yeah, and he's going to be in both of those.
Ooh.
But I honestly like I get what you mean. Like his character is cringy, but I think he did a good job. I think like he portrayed what they wanted that character to be early on. Because honestly, like you're right, that's exactly what happens. But I don't think that his acting is just as kitschy and goofy and unbearable by the end as it is at the beginning. I don't
Yeah.
think so. And I think he's
So
meant to be kind of overacting in a way in those first few scenes to kind of to convey that naivety.
let me just start off by saying that I don't have a problem with him as an actor.
Okay.
I really liked him in the Fear Street trilogy that
I still
Netflix did
need to see
a
those, man.
couple years ago. They're great movies.
Yeah.
And I'm always excited to see him in that role, but I just I don't know, man. He felt like to me, he felt kind of like somebody that got there. He felt like an actor that got their start on Disney or Nickelodeon, and they were trying to do like an edgy role to kind of
Yeah.
break out of that stereotype. That's to me, that's how he played it, and that
Yeah.
may have been the direction that he got. But I think it's a mixture of just poor direction and overacting on his part
Sure. Sure.
because I think, I know this is a Nicolas Cage podcast, but Nicolas Cage kind of sets this like bar and this tone for how the acting is going to be. And it seems like literally everyone else, aside from the Skinner guy, I will say the Skinner guy was like the only other good
Yeah.
act performance in this movie.
Yeah.
Everyone else just kind of felt like they were overacting, especially Paul Racky, who plays McDonald in this movie. When they got back to the town and like found him.
Yeah.
That scene was so hard to watch
Yeah.
because he was just chewing every piece of scenery he could get his hands on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think I would overall pretty much agree with that. I think that like I think the Skinner does a really good job. I also think the other like the like drunk God-fearing Bible reader guy, I think he does a really good job, honestly. If nothing else, I just like the dynamic he has with everyone else.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I definitely see your point for sure.
I also want to talk about how this movie like takes these like montage sequences and somehow manages to like edit them completely out of order. Like I don't know if it's like supposed to be giving us as the viewers like this illusion of like will uh i- hallucinations or like what his state of mind is as he's kind of becoming progressively uh you know I guess more unhinged is the best way I could put it, but it just the editing in this movie just felt like they hired someone right out of high school to do the
Yeah.
editing.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. I hadn't really think about I don't know. I'm still kind of learning to think about and look at editing, honestly,
Sure.
as like a critical movie viewer. And honestly, I think part of me was just really impressed by how beautiful a lot of this movie was. That like I didn't always see things like that, or if I did, I chalked them up to writing and not editing.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I think there was I think some of those montages like with Miller, like directing things and the days are just kind of glazing by. And that one scene I mentioned earlier with him just kind of shooting at Buffalo and yelling things and like stuff like that. I think they were trying to convey something in that just doesn't make it across. Um,
That's fair.
so I can definitely see that at least.
Yeah, and that's 100% fair. Like I'm looking at this. I'm a cinephile, so and I'm a nerd, so I have a tendency to kind of look at things like editing and like
Sure.
how the story flows, and I just don't think it's here.
Yeah.
And I think this movie makes just really some really dumb editing choices or like narrative things that
Yeah.
really like I feel like I don't know how you feel. I feel like winter in this movie comes way too late.
Dude, yeah, yes, yeah. The movie in general, and I say this about every movie, and I'm very sorry, but the movie is too long. This movie, and it's not that
100%.
long. It's not even really that long, but like it's either too long or there's just too little in it for its length, which I guess is a different way of saying the same thing, but like it just is. It's just too long. If this is really the story they wanted to tell, they just used too much time to do it. It was not necessary. They could have they could have easily cut 15 minutes out of this movie, and I might give it a half star more. Truly.
What I think
Like,
is crazy about this movie is not to cut you off, is all
yeah,
of the marketing for this movie is the winter stuff. Like
God, that's
e-
weird. But it is
everything
beautiful.
everything that I've seen is just like Nicolas Cage's like bald face with like all of the snow
Like
in
the
his
snow.
beard
Yeah.
and like that's it. Like
Yeah.
all of the teaser trailer stuff was like the winter stuff and it just the fact that winter comes like with it at the tip of the third act, it just seems so it's like such a weird decision all around.
Yeah. Yeah. You're definitely right. I didn't see as much of the marketing as you did, but yeah, if that's the case, then yeah. Um, they just spend too long. Yeah, and I really feel like, especially now that we're talking about it and I'm reflecting, I feel like the movie has a far stronger start than it does anything else. I think up until and even then, the journey to where they were going, all of that was pretty okay. I liked the scenes, where they had gotten there and they were like setting up the guns and cleaning. I liked seeing, that a lot of that period stuff I thought was really great, where he's like actually packing bullet shells and things like that. Like that was really satisfying. Some of the skinning scenes was kind of cool. And then right about after there like after you see some of the skinning and some of how they're setting up camp, right there, movie just goes downhill.
See,
Because everything has already been established and they do basically nothing with it the whole time.
yeah, I think the establishment, I think that it's got a really strong opening to this, but I think a lot of like that tension, because like the winter sequences are like where it's supposed to be like hitting peak point of tension, right?
Right.
And I just felt like they did, like you said, like they did absolutely nothing with it. Like they had the every chance to like even like, all right, so there's a scene in the third act where um Coach is like he's the older guy, he's one-armed, and Schneider is the guy that is the Skinner. So there's a scene where Hoach is like slowly trying to poison Schneider,
Yeah.
and this could have been like such a good like, you know, breaking point scene to kind of like break the camp up, and
Yeah.
like could have been like a brawl, but instead it's like Schneider confronts Hoach, and like Hoach just basically like shuts down.
Yep.
And I was like, dude, you had every like right to like every setup to do something with this, and you did squat.
Yeah. Yeah. Like basically one guy is trying to kill the other slowly because I guess because he views him as like a sinner and he's trying to be the wrath of God or something. And like again, a lot of these things are just not fleshed out, right? So he's like trying to kill this guy slowly. It could have been a big altercation. It could have added like a good bit of drama to the whole camp, X, Y, and Z. Basically, one guy beats the other guy to death. Miller, Cage's character, finds him the next day, takes it for granted. That's it. And it's so dumb. Like it's so just like, oh, well, there goes that character. And it really doesn't add anything or really remove much of anything from the story, tension wise or anything. Like it just happens.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
Calling all cosplayers and photographers in the vibrant cosplay universe. Are you ready to take the spotlight and be featured in the hottest cosplay magazine around? Look no further than Creative Cosplays Magazine. Dive into a world of creativity, inspiration, and jaw-dropping artistry. We celebrate you, the heroes behind the costumes and the magicians behind the lens. Join our community at creativecosplays.com and follow us on Instagram at creative.cosplays and at Creative Cosplays Mag for all the latest updates. Your passion, your art, it deserves to shine. Don't miss your chance to be a part of the next epic issue. Submit your best work and let your creativity roar. Creative Cosplays Magazine, where imagination meets the page. Join us today. Creative Cosplays Magazine. Be legendary. Be creative. Be you.
How do you feel like this movie does like handles like in developing its characters? Do you think that they are here? Like, I mean, Will obviously because he
One
comes
character
in.
develops in the whole movie.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, I started saying that question, and I was like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
Will is transformed. Nicolas Cage is just like a really angry old guy and
Yeah,
then becomes a poor angry old guy by the end of the movie.
pretty much. Yeah. Yeah, and it's like and I like Cage's character and I think he did a good job. But even that character, like even if they didn't develop him right from start to end, even if he's just set in his ways and there was no development, they didn't so much as explain him, and that would have just been so much more satisfying. There would have been so much more payoff.
He's very mysterious.
Yeah, which is cool, but then like to what end?
Yeah, there one of the things that I want to like talk about as we're kind of winding down, unless like there's anything you want to talk about in terms of like mental health. There's a scene in here where like Snyder basically confronts Miller and is like, "Hey, we were supposed to be gone like a week ago, and like they're just in this like terrible situation and just continuously trying to get out."
Yeah,
And I think that's like such a good like when you can tell like everyone in the camp outside of Miller is like really uncomfortable with this topic. And I feel like that's kind of how like when you have like depression, like confronting the source of that depression is like it's very uncomfortable, but it's something that like you need to do for survival. It's how you essentially like grow as an individual. And
yeah,
we live in a society now where we try and literally do everything we can, like not to confront what makes us uncomfortable.
yeah, yeah. I've been um I've been thinking about something kind of like this a lot recently. I've been talking about it a little bit too, of just like um, sometimes like what I feel, uh, like I might feel whatever, I might feel sad. I might feel uh or be tempted or have the inclination to do something stupid, or I might feel um like when it comes to things like faith or something like that, I might feel like or even just disciplines. All of us have like chores and stuff, like dishes or whatever. I might feel like, oh, I don't want to do this, or like, oh, I can do this later, or oh, I'm doing this regularly and it's not helping, or I'm doing this regularly and I just keep having to do it regularly. When it comes to like those disciplines and making choices just for the betterment of like your mental health, your spiritual health. Um, things like that. Like what I've really begun to like phrase it as, how I've begun to talk about it recently is I'm just like, I'm starting to get to the point, and it's going to sound like really rash, and I'm sorry if this is at all like triggering for anybody. It's just like where I'm at. Like, I don't care how I feel. What I care about is like the freedom to make the decision regardless of how I feel.
Sure.
So it's like I don't care if I do not feel hopeful. I'm going to be hopeful anyway because this is my life and that's my choice. Just because I don't feel that way, just because I don't feel like working out or talking to a human or whatever, just because I don't feel that way doesn't mean that I can't still like have self-control for my life, do what I want regardless of how I feel. And I think it's really easy to get those things confused. It's really easy to assume that what you feel is what you want. And I'm sorry, but like that's just not freedom. It's
Yeah.
not, that's not living your own life. It's not.
Yeah, and also like building off that, like, it's one of those things that if you want to have, you need that freedom in order to, I feel like have healthy like mental health.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like a part of that journey is like making those difficult decisions and like, you've mentioned things like, dishes or like, going to the gym or, a number of other things like you might not feel like it then, but like also like you have to understand that part of decision making is also looking at the long goals. It's looking at,
Yeah.
I might not necessarily feel like it in this moment, but like if I put this off, how am I gonna feel? Or if I do it now, A, I don't have to do it later, but also be like, what is the long term goals, or the long term effects of me doing it now?
Yeah, dude. Like honestly, like when it comes to being okay, being a whole person, being having self-control over your life, when it comes to things like that gets more into the topic of like addiction or things like that, right? When it comes to those things, like isn't always, and in fact, I'd say it usually isn't one moment of breakthrough that you find yourself waiting for. It is momentary, daily, you know, habitual decisions
Yeah.
in a direction because that actually changes you. Like that is actually the mechanism and process of what change looks like rather than waiting for change to happen upon you because, like change could just happen upon you, but then if you're not responsible with it or if you're not ready for it, then what good is it going to be? It's like if somebody handed you a job that paid you two or three times more than you make now, that sounds awesome and it sounds like a solution to a lot of problems. But if you don't have the responsibility to do the job, to stick with the job, things like that, then it's going to profit you really nothing. What you need is to work on yourself little by little to become the kind of person that struggles well in the
Yeah.
long run, that is responsible, it is hopeful, that is where you want to be now in the long run. It's not about it's not a light switch, it's about betterment.
Yeah, and I think there's and I'm guilty of this too. Like I think that we have this problem with never never seeing outside of the moment. It's like
Hmm.
standing in the forest. It's like standing in a forest and like only seeing the tree that's in front of you instead of
Yeah.
the surroundings, whether that's, other trees or creeks or, the foliage, foliage,
Foliage.
foliage. And that's kind of where I've been to like recently too, is like being able to like enjoy the things that are like right in front of me. Like there are things outside of my control right now that like have been kind of messing with my mental health a little bit, but like one of the things that like I've been really disciplining myself on is like saying, "Eh, this situation is not gonna it's not gonna be better if I it's not gonna be better or worse if I worry about it. So like
Yeah.
I'm just gonna, choose things that are gonna, be beneficial for my mental health or,
Yeah.
right here because this is just a moment. This is just a chapter or a page in the long story that is my life.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
You How about some trivia?
Let's do it. That's what I'm in need of.
All right. So originally there were two other actors considered for the role of Will before it ultimately ended up that they went with the other guy because the director wanted a younger, and one of them happened to be Alex Wolff, who you may know from
Pig.
Big and Hereditary.
Yeah.
The
That would
other
have been
one,
cool. At one point in time, it would have been awesome.
yeah, the other one was Ty Sheridan, who previously worked with Cage on Joe, which you we haven't done yet.
We have not done yet.
But he had also worked on like Ready Player One,
Mhm.
a couple other films, Iron Man, so on and so forth.
Ready Player One, man. What an incredible movie. The book is better, and by the
Yeah,
book standards, the movie is basically trash, but it's still a really great movie.
it's just really fun.
Yeah.
This is the second collaboration between writer-director Gabe Poletsky and Nicolas Cage, and as they had both worked on the movie 2009's Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans.
We haven't done that one yet either.
We have not done that one. Um, this is the last one I got. So the website Movie Insider mistakenly credits Fred Heckinger and Jeremy Bobb, who play Will and Schreider in this movie, as Fred Heckinger Jeremy Bob. So just you could join their names together instead
It's
of
funny.
yeah, this one there's not a whole lot of trivia as of this, which happens from time to time. But
Yeah, and it is a fairly new movie and stuff, so it just happens.
yeah, well so I guess this is also this is the last trivia I can give you. It is based on a 1960 novel of the same name by John Edward Williams.
Right. Yep.
So I think I know the answer to this, but Mr. Micah, is Butcher's Crossing worthy of high praise?
It's not. It really isn't. Maybe it could have been. Like I said, it is really beautiful. Like I try to be as absolutely honest. I try to be honest about any movie, right? But like, I wanted to really give this movie its due. I'm glad we took a good amount of time with this instead of just blowing through like a 25-minute episode because we didn't like it. Because this movie has been very anticipated, even if only for us. Um, you know, but no, I just if you're a fan of westerns, check it out. If you're a Nicolas Cage completionist like we are, I'm kind of sorry. Um, I just am. It's all right. This movie, if you had like a room in your house, right, that was like just had a big empty wall and you had like a projector and then you had like some friends over, not to watch a movie, but just to like mingle and hang out and listen to music or whatever, and you like put this movie on as like background lighting, maybe put the sound on, it would be really beautiful. The movie's really aesthetically pleasing. Um, it would be pretty cool to just walk into a room and see like, oh wow, buffalo carcasses. Like that would be pretty jarring and fun, right? But like, I'm, and I said this kind of about Inconceivable. Like this movie has a place. This movie has an audience. But I wouldn't say it's worthy of high praise.
I 100% agree. This movie is as far from high praise as you can get. I feel like if you like westerns, this one is going to be enjoyable for you. I think I think this movie is nothing more than has a bloated, predictable narrative and really just has what I will call aggressively stupid editing decisions.
Yeah,
Nicolas Cage is the best thing about this movie, but without a doubt, this movie blew chunks. It was
yeah.
terrible.
And it has a very average rating on Letterboxd, which really, really surprises me.
What surprises me is that this movie has a actually I'm gonna just read this. I know we typically don't care about this sort of stuff. But this movie has a 71% on Rotten Tomatoes,
That's crazy.
with a general critics consensus saying, quote, Butcher's Crossing benefits from Nicolas Cage's lead turn, which helps make this largely boilerplate Western more compelling than not. There is nothing in this movie that made
Not
me
compelling.
like it is as far from compelling as you can get.
Dude. It was one of those things where I was like, I'm really glad I'm alone in this theater because if I had somebody with me, I would just be talking to them this whole movie.
Yeah.
But I was also like, man, I really wish I wasn't alone in this theater. This is boring.
Yeah. God, this movie was just it was not worth the year wait that
Yeah.
we had built up the anticipation for.
No, but I mean, hey, it happens. And I'm really glad to say that, like, for the most part, Josh, we've been doing this podcast for some years now. That is not common. Usually, if we anticipate a movie and if we're excited about it, it pays off.
Yeah, this is
So
true.
like, it's bound to happen sooner or later, but it usually doesn't, and that's glad. I'm glad for that. Renfield, like, dude, that movie was amazing, and we were so hyped for that for a while.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Well, we got one more release this year. Technically,
Well, at least one more.
yeah, so technically one more. And potentially dream not dream scenario, the retirement plan if it gets a Blu-ray release.
Yeah, we have Cage has done one, two, three movies already that we haven't done this year, and then one more movie that's coming out this year that that Dream Scenario that we'll have to do. Of the 4 movies that we haven't done, including Dream Scenario, there is one we're going to put off. We already talked about it. I won't say what it is, but we have made the executive decision to give it just some time. But yes, very excited for some of the other things.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll be back in 2 weeks. Until then, where can people find you
Yeah,
online?
you can find me on Letterboxd. It's just at VHZest. You can find me on TikTok if you care about that. I don't really post. I need to. Yeah. Anyway, it's VHZest2, the numeral 2. And is that it? That might be it for right now. Yeah. I mean, I have a LinkedIn, but don't follow me on LinkedIn. Oh, and you can follow me on YouTube also if you really want to. It's again just at VHZest, same kind of TikTok content, but yep.
Yeah, well, you guys can also follow me on Letterboxd. My name is Captain Nostalgia. You guys can follow my other podcast, Abyss Gazing. This is a horror podcast where we come out brand new episodes every Wednesday. You guys can follow that. And that's I Praise wherever you guys get your podcast from. Hit that subscribe button. And you guys can also I am trying to think. You guys can follow our parent company, Victims and Villains. We are on Facebook, Instagram, wherever you guys get your podcast from, Patreon and YouTube. So until next time, remember to keep on caging.